Now this video will be pretty short because we're just going to look at a couple features that's made from our groundwater. But does groundwater move? And the answer to that is yes. We looked at how moving groundwater can create those cones of depression. But remember, water's ability to move through the ground depends on its the ground's permeability. So the more permeable, the better the water can move. But yes, water does move. And as it moves, it can create some different features. So groundwater flowing underground can drastically change the landscape. And the way it's going to do that is by creating caverns and sinkholes, which are basically caves and sinkholes. And that's what we're going to look at next. So if you take too much water out of the ground too quickly, it can cause that ground to collapse, and that's what we call a sinkhole. Now, you can have a very small sinkhole, kind of like where this funky guy with the pink hair is standing. Now, never, ever, ever do this because you don't know if the ground will continue to sink or not. But this is just an area in the ground where the water has sunk, but the ground has sunk, but it's not been anything too crazy. Over here, this is also a sinkhole, but the water that left the ground caused the ground to sink very drastically and create a huge sinkhole. So never stand in a small sinkhole because you don't know if it will get turned into a larger sinkhole. So the way you get a sinkhole is if you have too much water that's removed too quickly. Remember, the water that's in between all the little gaps and pores, it's acting like a support system for the ground. And so if you remove all of that, especially very, very quickly, it can cause the ground to shift and move further down below, and that can then cause all the area above it to not be supported, and so therefore it will collapse or sink. Now, another way this can happen is if you have a ton of rain and the water is flowing and it literally takes some of the dirt with it and moves it away from the area. That's what we call the ground being washed out. And the last way it can happen is if that ground is actually going to be dissolved away. And we see that with chemical weathering. So remember how we can have acid rain. And one way we get acid rain is when you have pollution, such as carbon dioxide, that dissolves with the water vapor. It will come back or precipitate back down, and so the rain is acidic. Well, if that acid rain sinks into the ground, then sometimes that acid will get into the ground and start dissolving away the rock that it's sitting in. And if it dissolves all that rock away, it can literally remove all the sand and the bedrock that was there, that again can cause the ground to just collapse and fall in on itself. And I do have a few videos of sinkholes, some of the top 10 sinkholes, or sinkholes that have caught people off guard. They didn't know it was there, and then they just are walking down the sidewalk and fall right down into the sinkhole. But I do have a couple of those videos. If you're interested in watching them, you can click on the links in the videos. But another landscape feature, and those are some of them, another landscape, before we get to the caves, these are some pictures of your sinkholes. This is one that formed a long time ago, but the ground or the vegetation has begun to grow again within it. This is a sinkhole that occurred underwater, but the ocean just filled it right back up with water. So you have a very shallow area, and then this giant area that's very, very deep. So these are areas where you actually could go scuba diving down into the bottom of the sinkhole, because that's going to be such a deep area within that area. This is what we're looking at more for a washed out road. And this is why you never, ever, ever drive through flooded water, because if the water is flooded, you can't tell that the ground is no longer there. And then people can tend to drive into these areas and then they drown. Which is why, again, turn around, don't drown if you ever see flooded streets. So a lot of times sinkholes can be caused just by, water that's flowing through the ground too quickly or acid rain that's dissolving it. But another thing that can create them are pipes. So as you see here, you have these pipelines or sewer systems that have been set up. And if there's ever a leak in the sewer, say such as right here, then it can cause, just an outpouring of water that can then move all of this dirt away and cause the ground around it to collapse. So it could be caused by natural weather events, or it could be caused by a leaky sewer system. But all of those can create your sinkholes. Caverns are the next land feature that flowing groundwater can cause. So a cavern is a type of cave, and it's typically caused because of a soluble rock. So this is, again, where you have acidic rainwater that has mixed in with limestone, typically is the type of rock we're looking at, and it chemically weathers away or breaks down and dissolves that rock away, and it can leave you with a cave. So in this picture up here, the water table is even with where the water is, but at one point this water table was up here, and when it was up here, it dissolved away this hole in the rock. And then as over time as water evaporated, the water table dropped and it left behind this cave feature in what used to be underground. And then I think I have some pictures of caves as well for you. So these are different caves that have really cool rock features. And if you ever have the opportunity to travel into a cave, I think it'd be a cool thing to do. I've never done it, but obviously the pictures are very unique. Typically with caves, you're going to have a lot of moisture because, again, they are underground and they were created by groundwater that dissolved rock away. So you're still going to have that water. So a lot of people can dive into caves or they'll take boats throughout caves and look at all the different features. And so you've got really pretty rocks. But again, you still have that groundwater because that's what created the cave in the first place. And there's another one. Okay, and here's just a neat little brain break, a challenge for you. You have to connect all of the dots with only 4 straight lines, and you can't pick up your pen as you do it. So just for example, I'm not going to give the answer, but you could draw 4 straight lines like 1, 2, 3, 4, but I didn't connect all the dots. So, but again, you can't pick up your hand as you do it. Or you could go, and again, I'll do something that's not right. 1, 2, 3, 4. So try to do that, and then I'll let this just run for a little bit, and then I'll show you the answer on the next slide. Okay, so I'm about to show you the answers. There's actually 2 things that you could have done. So here they are. The first one, the whole concept of this is thinking outside the box, so the lines have to go a little bit further. So here's the 2 things that you could have done in order to make that work. When somebody showed me this, I could not make it work. I had to just Google the answer. So if you figured it out, good for you. Now, here's just a couple review questions. If you cannot answer these questions, then you need to go back and look over the material. But how can groundwater get contaminated? What's the difference in a confined and unconfined aquifer? And what is the result of overusing groundwater? Make sure you go back in your notes and you figure out the answers to all of these questions. And that is it for this video.